So we're sitting down here at the Grand Prix of Lommel, and found myself in the living area at the GP of Lommel, and got Adam Wheeler from On Track Off Road, and next to me is the man who I actually haven't met until today or yesterday evening. It's Chris Leatt, from the founder of the Leatt neck brace, and it's pretty exciting to be here and to be talking about some really cool subjects about the brace, how the company was founded, why the brace was actually first built. So I think we should start off with a small introduction and just see what you think and tell us exactly how the brace came about.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction and taking the time out of your training schedule to have a chat. It's really good. And Adam, always good to see you. So, the brace started for me many years ago after witnessing an accident that really sort of changed my perception of safety protection, and I think quite pertinent for me. And you'll understand that having a young child, my son was 4 at the time, just started riding 2 weeks before this event, and I went to an enduro event, and somebody had fallen off, broken his neck, and passed away, unfortunately. And my young son Matthew, 4 years, was with me, and it really struck home that I needed to protect him if I was going to let him continue to ride. And that's what I did. I stopped him riding, and I sat down and really thought long and hard about whether there was a way to prevent neck injuries. So with science and sort of a surgical approach, coming from a medical background to why injuries occur, I came up with this idea and this concept. Had to build it on family members initially, lots of prototyping, and then had to also find a way to test it, because of course there were no test standards. All the dummies that were in existence were mostly for car accident reconstruction, and eventually we got to a point where we had a prototype that was actually wearable, and some physical testing that gave us some good results. And after being invited to Germany by BMW and using their much more advanced test center, it allowed us to, with confidence, move forward with the project. And I remember saying to my professor, I want to take a year out to go and pursue this and find somebody to make it. And well, it's 15 years or 16 years ago now, so haven't been back to medicine since.
Right.
So it's sort of taken over my life.
I mean, on that subject, Chris, like you say, it's been 15 years since you first started things. Is it still unusual, I mean, to come to a World Championship event or to talk to athletes in the US or globally and see how the neck brace is still being used and how people have responded to what you kind of dreamt up?
I mean, I have to pinch myself every now and again. I mean, it's a significant product and a significant part of my life. And when I travel to a foreign country and I see a van or a storefront or somebody wearing my name, which is actually just a holding pattern. The company wasn't, in the beginning it wasn't really going to be a company. It was about solving a problem, and it wasn't going to be called Leatt. It was a holding pattern name, and it kind of stuck because it's an unusual name. But it's actually fantastic to see it still out there. In the back of my mind when I started, if I thought to myself, if the science is right, it actually does prevent injuries, and it's comfortable to wear. There's no reason why it couldn't have worldwide appeal. But that's sort of in the back of your mind. So it's fantastic to see where it's come from, and it's also allowed us to approach other problems. From head protection to knee protection. It's allowed us to take the same kind of scientific approach, and hopefully we'll continue to see products in the market.
Because I think there's people that still think, do I need a neck brace? Does it work? But for Shaun, I mean, you've used it more than 10 years. So, I mean, why did you pick it up in the beginning, and why do you still wear it?
I think for me in the beginning, right back to 2007, when I think the brace was finally just starting to take off after the initial sort of testing, and your first prototype, you managed to get it sort of out on the market in around 2007. That's when braces became available in Europe, and there was very few guys using them. I remember Tom Church from Molson Kawasaki, and it was actually the team that I was riding in at that point. The team manager said, "Look, I bought you one of these neck braces. I really think you should be wearing it. Take it away and try it." And it was after the first race of the season. I just said, "Okay, let's put this thing on, see how it feels." And you touched on it yesterday evening about males, when they buy something, they don't necessarily always look at the instructions straight away. It was one of those cases as well. I took it out of the box, put it on, and I went and done a moto. And straight away I didn't feel that comfortable with it. So I came back, looked at the instructions, set it up properly, and from that moment on there was a click where I was like, I didn't even really feel like I was wearing it, and it just didn't sort of annoy me at all when I was riding. So from that moment on I just began to use the neck brace every single week, and just seen how the brace developed over the years, and we're at a point now where I've got a brace that it's lighter than before, it's easier to clean, it's easier to set up for loads of different guys. In a matter of just 2 or 3 seconds you can sort of set up the front and set up the rear, I just don't know that I'm wearing it, and I just think that if there's something out there that can really protect you, then why aren't you wearing it? I wouldn't think of riding without a helmet. I certainly wouldn't think about riding without my knee braces, because that's a feel thing, but my knees, touch wood, have never given me any problems. But the brace is the same for me now. Until I finish my motocross career, there's no chance that you'll catch me on a bike without a neck brace.
I mean, it's kind of like an iPhone, it seems every edition has been lighter, or is there some modification? It's, there's been some sort of improvement. I mean, if you look back to images of you in 2010, the brace looked like quite a cumbersome piece of kit. I mean, Chris, in terms of making that evolution, has that been a major investment? Has it been like, I don't know, millions of dollars or millions of hours, or?
It requires a lot of time. So if we, from the old brace to the new brace to the next generation brace, what's really important for us is that it performs the same way. So we have a sort of an interesting lab setup where we take our brace and we drop weights on an anvil and try and understand at what point the brace will fail, because the failure of the brace at a certain force is important. And then we try a lot of different materials. So there's obviously a lot of R&D into what materials to use. Then you decide that I'm going to use glass full nylon, for example, instead of composite. And then becomes a manufacturing problem. How do you mold it and how do you demold it? And then there's the evolution of the materials. So what is the feel of the helmet on the brace, the feel of the brace on the body. So there's a lot of investment into molds. There's a lot of investment time-wise, and you see the evolution from one product to the next, but there may be 20 iterations in between to get it from the one place to the next.
It must be quite a feat of engineering. I mean, like you say, I don't think people really appreciate the R&D that goes into it. And again, how you've expanded that to the rest of the product range in here. But I mean, just to tackle a couple of the subjects, I think people now, because the neck brace has been part of the motocross landscape for a good while. You see riders like Shaun, Marvin Musquin, people who have confided in it for a number of years. But I think people still have questions. They still think, is this going to snap my collarbone if I fall off? Is this going to be flapping around hitting my helmet when I don't want it to? I mean, Shaun, your experience, even with collarbone breaks, I mean, have you ever felt that it's endangered that part of your body, or?
No, absolutely not. And the newest evolution of the brace that I'm wearing, the collarbone cutout is absolutely, there's no chance that that's going to be getting anywhere close to touching your collarbone. We actually covered, on a chat, yesterday evening, that most of the time when you crash on track, you're going to put your hand out in front of you. The force is travels straight up your arm through your collarbone, and that's the weakest point. It's made like that to actually break. So there's nothing to say that the brace touching down on it. I think Chris would probably cover this better than myself, but there's a theory that the helmet touching your collarbone can actually break it down the way rather than breaking it up the way. So these are all things that I've done in the past. Pre neck brace for me, I broke at least 4 or 5 collarbones, in quite close concession. And after actually starting to wear the neck brace, it wasn't until we actually touched on this subject earlier that I haven't broken a collarbone since I've been wearing a neck brace, and that's really quite an amazing thing for me to hear, because there is a lot of stigma out there about people saying, I stopped wearing the brace because I broke my collarbone, or this or that. But, I don't think it's possible.
Well, your personal experience, I mean, you've had 4 or 5 breaks before a brace and none thereafter. I mean, it's a really interesting topic, is that actually, and now the clinical data is out there, you're less likely to break your collarbone wearing a neck brace, and there's a very good reason for that. But all the way through the development of the brace, we have a hybrid 3 dummy with a special neck that's a motorcycle neck. So the dummies that we use for testing come out of the automotive industry, used for impact testing in cars. So we've got a slightly modified version. It's got ribs, it's got a collarbone, and it's got a motorcycle neck. It's called an MATD neck. There are only a handful of them around in the world. And they are more biofidelic and allow you to put the dummy in a motorcycle riding position prior to an impact. So as we've done this development and we measure the collarbone forces, they've never been higher in impacts, and in certain impact scenarios they're actually lower. And we've seen from the EMS Action Sport study now that there's a 45% reduction in collarbone injuries wearing a neck brace, which surprises us. It's higher than we thought, but we always thought that it would be reduced given a neck brace. As you mentioned, falling on an outstretched arm, falling on your shoulder is going to break a collarbone. The other cause of a collarbone injury is your helmet rim. So if I fall on my left hand shoulder, my helmet's going to go to the right. So if I break my right collarbone and I'm falling on my left shoulder, it's likely to be from the helmet rim. If it's on the same side as my fall, it's likely to be from the fall, and that's going to be the vast majority. 80% of the falls are going to be shoulder or outstretched arm, same side. But wearing a neck brace, you're now shielding the collarbone from the helmet rim, and you're going to remove those injuries, and therefore there's actually a reduction. So commonly spoken about the fact that neck braces break collarbones. Why? Because collarbones are the most commonly broken body in motocross.
Is it still frustrating for you that people make that link between the brace and broken collarbones? In the same way, Shaun, that it's frustrating for you that they say braces impede your flexibility of the bike because you don't win Grand Prix in tracks like Lommel if you have something that's impeding your riding.
Absolutely. We spoke about this again yesterday, that the brace is there to protect you. If you were riding and you didn't feel your helmet touching the brace at specific points when you were riding, whether that's once a lap or once every other lap, then the brace is probably not doing its correct job. Your head's all over the shop when you're riding. So some people can maybe say, I can feel it touching the brace, it's impeding my riding. It's not. It's just it's there to do its job when it's needed. And I think that's probably a small topic that we can touch on. Some of the 125 guys were really revving up there. The brace is made to spread load during an impact, and I think there's a lot of stigma about the thoracic on the back. That's changed in evolution as well, and I don't know if maybe you want to just touch on some of the sort of.
To answer both your questions, it does irk me a little bit. Not because I don't like being challenged. I love being challenged, and I welcome people asking questions. The problem is that people don't ask questions. They come up with a theory, whether it's hearsay or the trainers told them something, or there's a whole debate going on social media. Have an opinion, but have an informed opinion. I think that's really critical. If you believe something, you should have a basis for belief, not just hearsay, because you're not applying your mind. So that's what sort of is irksome to me. But in terms of back injuries, and I'd also like to touch on head injuries, but back injuries, T6, T7, which is round about where the thoracic member ends on the brace, happens to be the most commonly injured part of the thoracic spine. Commonly injured when you land on your head with a bit of flexion in the motorcycle impacts. Extension is normally when the motorcycle hits you in the back, but a fall off a motorcycle that breaks your thoracic spine is normally mid-thoracic spine, and that's where the strut ends. So it's coincidental that the two are around the same level. The strut, however, will break at a seventh of the force required to break the spine. So there's no ways that the strut has got any impact on, in extension, back injuries. And we've tested this, and it's been independently reviewed, and we've been sued in the US. Americans do like a lawsuit, and gone through full jury trial, and all the expert witnesses could not prove that the thoracic member has got anything to do with back injuries. So it's good to be vindicated there. And when it comes to back injuries, as I said, they're normally in flexion. When they're in flexion, actually, as the spine flexes, the thoracic member comes off the back. It's not touching the back. In fact, the pressure applied during a flexion injury becomes less with the thoracic member. One other topic which is often not discussed or well documented is that head injuries are actually less likely with a neck brace. So that may be quite difficult to get your head around initially. But if you consider that if you fall off a motorcycle, land on your head, there's initially a big deceleration head onto the ground, and then your head starts moving relative to your torso. And if you watch high-speed video footage of a head going back in an extension, you can actually imprint the back of your helmet on your back. It's quite significant. That means very high-speed footage, and it occurs for a very short duration. So you don't see it on normal video footage, but on high-speed footage, it's hugely significant how far the head can go backwards. So now you have this head that's stopped, and it now starts accelerating relative to the rest of your body, and then stops again. So you have this big peak of deceleration that your brain is exposed to, and then you have a second peak as the head whip stops at some point. If therefore you can stop the head whip in the cycle much earlier, it doesn't accelerate as far, and that second peak is less. So the insult that the head sees in an impact is reduced wearing a neck brace.
So you think the message is, the neck brace, has kind of a as a versatile use, in terms of giving you a safety ad, but there's also the educational aspects of riders needing to fit it properly. Like you mentioned there, your anecdote, Shaun, of like riding and feeling uncomfortable until you adjusted it. So, as simple as it is now, it's not something you take straight out of the box and throw on. You have to actually take some due diligence in making sure it's just working.
I think that's the same with any sort of technical equipment. You don't buy a set of 45 boots if you're 43. Same with a knee brace. There's all different sorts of different foam pads and things and different sizes, small, medium, large. Like a helmet, you don't buy a small if you need a medium. So,
taking the knee brace is a perfect example. If you've got the lockout set at the inappropriate angle for you, you're going to climb on the bike and say, "Gosh, I can't ride." It's locked in flexion and I can't ride. It just needs to be adjusted, and if your riding style changes, maybe you need to adjust your brace slightly. You start wearing a chest protector or a loose guard that you haven't worn before, maybe you need to do another little adjustment.
Do you think, from the fans that you've met, through your career in the last 10 years or so, Chris, like the customers and some of the riders you're speaking to, do you think people are becoming more informed? They're becoming a little bit more educated now. Like Leatt has a fantastic helmet as well with 360 turbine technology. The development in the helmet industry for off-road particularly is advancing. There's lots of theories out there and lots of kind of different technology. Do you think riders are getting a bit more smarter about what they need and what is out there and what they could buy? Leatt itself has a range of braces.
Yeah, I think there is more awareness, and I think maybe our approach in the beginning wasn't the right one, where we published this white paper, and I think as I mentioned yesterday, I felt it really important to put all our test data and all our research, make it available to the public right in the beginning. But if you want to read 141 pages of technical jargon, it may not be the right method. We as guys, we discuss battle to read the instruction manual. So I think more video, more interactive, having riders out there that are ambassadors for the product because they believe in it and understand all the potential safety aspects, as you mentioned. It's not just for necks; it's for necks, collarbones, and brains. So I think there's an evolution, and I think what it's also helping us is that we're no longer just a neck brace company. Our knee braces are very innovative. They don't have a joint in the middle. If you look at the C-frame, it allows you to grip the bike better. We have helmets that have got turbine technology, and there's a move these days towards, and it's really is the correct thing, like MIPS and other companies have done, to look at rotational acceleration to the head. We used to think in the old days, and all the old helmet standards were written around big deceleration is what causes brain injury. Actually, is not. It's a smaller rotational acceleration that actually causes diffuse axonal injury in a big accident, which is catastrophic, or concussion from multiple impacts. So we've developed in our helmet technology a turbine that caters for both. So it stops the relatively low speed impacts that riders are suffering on a motocross track, for example, as well as rotational injuries. And as I think our products grow and our ambassadors grow, and hopefully with more sort of social media input, hopefully the public will become more conscious And I think, racing organisations like the FIM and other governing bodies are starting to do the right thing in terms of introducing more test standards for example, roost guards and chest protectors. The way they scrutiny of products, making sure that you've got the right helmets. The FIM are now working on a new standard for helmets. That is really a good standard. It really looks like they're doing their due diligence and their homework, and they're producing a really good standard for helmets. And I think that the next step for the public and for the evolution of safety is that there's got to be a neck brace standard. Unfortunately, we as a company can't produce it. We can certainly assist in what we think is the right aspects to cover in a good standard. But if you look at the way standards are being developed and the FIM's approach to the new helmet standard, I'm really hopeful that is going to accelerate the understanding of safety. At the end of the day, I mean, you love riding. It's your profession. You want to keep on riding. If you get injured, it has a significant impact on your, on your pocket and your fun and everything else. And most people, let's face it, aren't professional riders. They've got to go to work on Monday morning. So rather ride, have fun, and be protected. Ride safe.
I think that's one of the things my dad taught me when I was growing up. He said, make sure you protect yourself, because it's a long career. If you protect yourself well, you can get the most out of it, and if you don't, then it's going to be a disaster.
Can you ever see a time, because now if you look at another sport like MotoGP, airbags are compulsory. I know Alpine Stars have been collecting data for a number of years actually for an off-road airbag. Can you see a time when neck braces could actually enter the rule book? I mean, do you think it's possible? I mean, I know the FIM are quite non-committal about it. I think they need more independent research or whatever it is they believe. I mean, Shaun, do you reckon it was something that, would you like to see more with kids? I mean, I know there's lots of riders in Loretta Lynn's, which is just happening in the US, who adopt neck braces. Kids seem to be, really taking on the message of what this protection can do.
I think with kids, it's their parents are the main driving force behind which products they use. The kids don't go out and buy their own products. So, I know from a lot of my friends and family, they're like, oh, we need to make sure our kids protected. Great helmet, boots, knee braces, Leatt brace or some form of neck brace. And I think that's important as a kid. If you get used to that as a kid, you're more likely to wear it when you grow up. The main tricky market is the guys who have been riding for years and trying to get them to start wearing one. But I honestly think fitted properly, a brace doesn't really inhibit your riding at all. So I think there should be more people wearing them. I definitely tell people that they should be wearing a brace, and I think in the future it might be a good idea to have it compulsory, purely because at World Championship level, the speeds are getting higher every year, the bikes are getting faster, the suspension's getting better, the jumps are getting bigger. It's only a matter of time before the crashes become bigger as well. And I think, I don't know, for whatever reason, the last few years in MXGP, we have had a lot of injuries. Now, if we can save some of those injuries by protecting ourselves properly, and I think it can't be a bad thing.
Can you remember a time where you've wrecked the brace or you've had a big crash and you thought, oh, that's done a job for me?
It's just not very good to say, but yeah, I have trashed a few braces, and when you come back in and you see the thoracic's done its job, or you think, wow, that could have been disastrous, and I've walked away from that. I've came in, I'm a little bit stiff, but at the end of the day, you think it could have been a lot worse. And now I've got a wife and a young man to look after. That's very important to me.
Because that's one of the ironic things is if you take a Leatt brace out the box, it seems so robust and well made. But the thing is, it snaps. It's designed to break.
Yeah. It's designed to break before it injures other body parts. I mean, the way the brace works is to unload a lot of force that would have gone through your neck onto the brace. So, as we discussed yesterday, if the threshold for injury, the point with all the studies have said that if you drop somebody on the head and there's compression of 5,000 newtons, you are likely to have a neck injury. And you wear a brace, and a 6,000 newton impact is reduced to 4,000 given the brace. You're walking. You've now walked away from an accident where you would have had an injury. I can't see how, given the clinical evidence now. I mean, the EMS Action Sport study looked at almost 10 years and almost 10,000 riders, showing an 89% reduction in neck injuries with a brace. I mean, I think there are now independent scientific studies, there are clinical studies. It's very difficult to ignore, and I think the first step really is to produce a standard. You know, like there are helmet standards, you know, there really should be a standard for neck braces against which they can be judged, because then you're saying, you know, and allows racing organizations as well to say, you know, we're not just recommending everything, we're recommending something that complies with a well thought out standard. And the, you know, the collection of data that Alpine Stars has been doing, the AMA been collecting injury data, we've been collecting injury data, EMS in the US have been collecting injury data. The data's there and it doesn't lie. I mean, it's clear that neck braces are good. So hopefully there's a standard in the near future.
I think you're going to need to put your one on soon.
Yeah, it's getting near that time. Probably go and gear up for first practice, and no, just thanks to you guys for taking the time out. Nice to finally meet you after all those years, and no, it's been nice to sit around and sort of chat around what the brace does for you, and I hope you guys can enjoy it and you know, give us your feedback, and hopefully we can increase the amount of people wearing neck braces.
Thanks.